Living in Oak Ridge Hills was never part of the plan. After years of traveling cross-country on my Harley, I thought settling down meant freedom from drama, not walking into a suburban war zone. But there I was, unpacking my life into a pristine HOA-monitored neighborhood where lawns were measured with rulers, and gossip traveled faster than fiber-optic internet. The place looked like a Stepford catalog, every house beige, every mailbox identical, and every neighbor suspiciously cheerful, at first. The only piece of rebellion on my otherwise rule-compliant property was my Harley-Davidson Fat Boy. Midnight black, chrome-polished, and treated with more care than most people give their firstborns. I parked it under a reinforced aluminum shelter beside the garage, chained, covered, and alarmed. For me, the Harley wasn't just a bike, it was my history. Every scratch on the chrome told a story. Deserts in Arizona, rainy motels in Oregon, breakdowns in Mississippi. That machine was the only constant in a decade of motion. It didn't take long for the neighborhood to notice. Some waved and complimented it during morning jogs. Others, mostly the older residents, frowned at its existence like it was some rebellious teenager blasting loud music in church. But none were quite like her. Karen. Her actual name was Patricia, but the neighborhood unanimously and silently referred to her as Karen, partly for her hair, the classic sideswept bob, partly for her attitude, but mostly because she carried the self-appointed badge of HOA authority like a sheriff in a lawless land. She was always dressed like she was headed to a court date, clipboard in hand, and a permanent squint as if she could spot code violations with infrared vision. If a blade of grass dared to grow out of alignment, Karen noticed. If your trash bin wasn't brought in by 9:01 a.m., Karen filed a report. And if you owned a motorcycle, well, you were obviously one speeding ticket away from being a criminal. Our first interaction was almost laughably polite. She rang my doorbell one morning, wearing a salmon-pink pantsuit and an expression like she was trying not to breathe in something foul. I opened the door, half expecting her to sell me a church invite. "Hi there, I'm Karen. Welcome to Oak Ridge Hills," she chirped, handing me a typed welcome pamphlet and an unsolicited HOA violation warning. My trash can was 6 inches too close to the curb. 6 inches. I smiled, nodded, and closed the door. But the real problem wasn't Karen. It was her son Tyler, a lanky mop-haired teenager who looked like he belonged on a skateboard, not in a classroom. I caught him staring at my Harley more than once. At first, it was harmless, the kind of look any teen might give to something fast, shiny, and loud. I even gave him a nod once, thinking maybe I'd let him sit on it for a photo someday. Bad idea. The following week, while I was washing the bike, Tyler approached me like we were old friends. "Hey, can I ride it?" he asked casually, like he was asking for a stick of gum. I blinked, certain I misheard him. "Ride it? Kid, this thing's got more torque than your mom's SUV. It's not a toy." He smirked. "Come on, just once around the block. I've played GTA. I know how to ride." I laughed, more from disbelief than amusement. "That's not how physics works, Tyler. Go home." He sulked and shuffled away, but not before muttering something under his breath. Something about boomer gatekeeping. I brushed it off. Kids say dumb things. But I should have known better. In Oak Ridge Hills, things fester. Grudges stew behind hedges and lace curtains. And when your kid doesn't get what he wants, some parents throw tantrums. Or in Karen's case, they file complaints, make calls, and turn your peaceful life into a legal circus. But back then, I had no idea what was brewing. I was just the new guy with the loud bike and the stubborn smile, thinking I could outwit HOA politics with patience and politeness. Spoiler alert, I was wrong. At first, I chalked Tyler's ridiculous request up to teenage bravado, the kind that burns out after a few slammed doors and ignored text messages. But Oak Ridge Hills didn't operate on normal rules. It had its own ecosystem, manicured, smiling, and quietly venomous. Within a week of that interaction, things started to shift. And not in a subtle way. It began with a polite email from the HOA. Apparently, someone had expressed concern that my motorcycle was excessively loud and caused undue stress to nearby residents. Funny, considering I hadn't even turned the ignition since Tyler's little joyride fantasy. I responded diplomatically, attaching a decibel chart comparing Harley exhaust to lawnmowers and garbage trucks, both of which were happily tolerated in our community. No reply. The next morning, I found a sticky note on my garage. "Not everyone appreciates noise pollution. Think of the children." Signed with a drawn frowny face. Very professional. Then came the HOA citations, in quick succession. Citation 1, improper storage of recreational vehicle. The Harley was parked under a city-approved shelter beside my garage, Same place as before. Citation 2. Failure to maintain uniform landscaping. One of my shrubs had grown half an inch above regulation height. Citation 3. Unregistered exterior camera placement. I had installed a small motion-activated security camera near my garage light. Legal but apparently aesthetic violation. 3 warnings in 5 days. A personal record. I would have laughed, but the tone changed when Tyler came around again, this time when I wasn't outside. I caught it on my security camera, him walking slowly around my driveway, peeking under the Harley cover, even tugging at the chain lock like he was testing it. That same smug look on his face, like it was just a matter of time before he got what he wanted. I confronted Karen that afternoon. She was pruning roses outside her home like a suburban samurai, snipping petals like they'd wronged her. "Karen," I began, polite but firm. "Your son was on my property this morning, touching my bike." She didn't look up. "Tyler has always admired your motorcycle. He has such passion for engineering. You should be flattered." "Flattered?" I repeated, incredulous. "He was trying to move it." She finally looked at me dead in the eye. "Boys will be boys. If you're so concerned, maybe you should keep your toys locked up better. This is a family neighborhood." That's when I realized this wasn't just entitlement. It was expectation. She genuinely believed her son had some unspoken right to my property, and that I was being unreasonable for denying it. A few days later, she upped the ante. She showed up at my door again, all smiles as if our last conversation hadn't happened. "I've been thinking," she said, "maybe a supervised ride around the cul-de-sac could solve all this tension. I'd even sign a waiver. Tyler is very mature for his age." I almost laughed in her face. Instead, I simply said, "No." The answer was no before and it's no now. Your son doesn't touch my bike. End of story. Her smile dropped like a curtain. "Well," she snapped, "don't be surprised if people start questioning whether someone with your temperament belongs in this neighborhood." And with that, she pivoted in her orthopedic sneakers and stormed back across the street, her posture stiff with indignation. From that moment on, it was war. My mailbox started getting HOA notices weekly. A mysterious complaint said I'd intimidated a minor with aggressive body language. Another suggested I'd violated communal harmony by refusing reasonable neighborhood interaction. Whatever that meant. Some neighbors began acting distant. Others offered cryptic encouragement like, "Hang in there," or "She's done this before." But no one wanted to be seen siding with the biker guy over the HOA queen. By then, I had begun documenting everything, every citation, every interaction, every HOA letter. I kept digital backups, hard copies, and even labeled a folder Karen Chronicles, just to remind myself I wasn't crazy. But one incident pushed it from petty to dangerous. It was a Saturday morning when I heard a sharp clang from outside. I rushed out to find Tyler, again, this time with a friend lifting the Harley cover. They froze when they saw me. Tyler had one hand on the throttle. "What the hell are you doing?" I barked, already pulling out my phone. Tyler scoffed, "I was just looking." "Chill out, man. You touch that bike again, I'm calling the cops," I said flatly. He smirked. "You won't. My mom runs this place." And then he walked off, like he owned the damn street. I didn't call the cops. Not yet. But I installed a second camera. And I started preparing for a fight I hadn't signed up for, because clearly, no, wasn't something this family heard very often. If there's one thing Oak Ridge Hills has taught me, it's that suburban warfare doesn't involve fists or shouting. It's fought with paperwork, passive-aggressive newsletters, and staged performances on security cameras. After Tyler's second attempt to touch my bike, I realized I wasn't just dealing with a spoiled teenager. I was up against a mother-son duo that had likely been getting their way for years through a combination of manipulation and intimidation. And they were just getting started. Within days of that confrontation, I received an email from the HOA marked urgent. The message, written in language that practically dripped with sarcasm, stated that a formal complaint had been filed accusing me of creating a hostile environment for a minor. The complaint referenced yelling, threatening gestures, and even the word assault, though no details were provided. It read more like a gossip column than an official report. I responded immediately, attaching screenshots from my security footage showing Tyler on my property, attempting to lift the bike cover with no one else present. No shouting. No assault. Just a teenage punk caught red-handed. I never got a response. Instead, 3 days later, I received a final notice from the HOA, a fine of $500 for non-compliant behavior impacting community cohesion. Whatever that meant. It was so vague it could have applied to someone sneezing too loudly. That's when I knew Karen was pulling strings. She wasn't just filing complaints. She was influencing decisions behind the scenes, pushing her narrative through whatever cozy relationship she had with the HOA board. I began to suspect she had her claws deeper into this community than I originally thought. If she could twist the HOA into enforcing made-up rules, what else could she do? So I started digging. I requested HOA meeting minutes under the community's transparency clause, something most residents didn't even know existed. What I found wasn't surprising, but it was enraging. Karen had been on the HOA board for 4 years. Her role? Community Safety and Compliance Chair. In other words, the gatekeeper of all complaints, violations, and neighborhood disputes. She was the complaint department, and the judge. A one-woman bureaucracy. That explained everything. While she was busy fining me for imaginary landscaping violations, she'd failed to disclose any conflict of interest when filing complaints directly involving her own family. Multiple times. Now I had something to work with. I documented everything. Created a timeline. Printed screenshots. Saved emails. Even the stupid sticky notes she left on my door went into a folder. I labeled it HOA Fraud, Phase 1. But Karen wasn't slowing down. She was getting bolder and theatrical. One afternoon, I pulled into my driveway to find her standing across the street, phone in hand, filming me like I was a criminal suspect. She didn't even try to hide it. As I got off my Harley, she loudly proclaimed to no one in particular, "He's doing it again," intimidating me in front of my house. I looked around. No one else was on the street. I walked up to her, calm but firm. Karen put the phone down. She took a dramatic step back. "You see this? You see how he approaches me aggressively? I'm documenting everything." So was I. My chest camera, which I'd started wearing discreetly, was recording the whole performance. I said nothing more. Just walked inside and uploaded the footage to my hard drive, adding it to the growing case file. The final straw came when I received a certified letter, a summons to attend a mandatory community mediation session regarding my behavior toward Karen and her son. If I refused, I could be subject to legal action from the HOA. The irony? I had been preparing my own complaint, not just about Tyler and Karen but about the misuse of HOA authority, manipulation of community processes, and potential fraud. A neighbor I barely knew, Raj from 2 streets over, tipped me off that Karen had previously pressured elderly residents into selling their homes by flooding them with citations. It wasn't just personal anymore. This was a pattern. So I decided to go one step higher. I began compiling all my documentation into a packet, organized, time-stamped, indexed. Not just for the HOA. Not just for the police. For the state attorney's office. I wasn't just going to defend myself. I was going to blow the whole thing wide open. And Karen? She had no idea what was coming. It happened on a Thursday. The kind of Thursday where nothing should go wrong. Clear sky, no leaf blowers, and for once even the neighborhood dogs weren't trying to outbark each other. I had taken the day off work to finish compiling my evidence packet. 3 weeks worth of emails, citations, security footage, and witness statements, all organized in a color-coded binder like I was heading to court. Because, in a way, I had just sealed the manila envelope labeled, "To, Office of the State Attorney, HOA Abuse Complaint," when I heard the knock. 3 sharp bangs. I opened the door expecting a neighbor, maybe even the mailman. Instead, I was greeted by 2 uniformed police officers. One male, mid-40s, looking tired of life. The other younger, probably fresh out of academy, with a notebook already in hand. "Sir," the older one began, "we've received a call from a resident across the street, claims of aggressive behavior and harassment." I didn't need to ask who made the call. "She's claiming you threatened her son," added the younger one, who was now glancing over my shoulder, possibly looking for signs of a hostage situation. I sighed, stepped aside, and motioned toward the kitchen table. "Come in. I have something you'll want to see." The younger one hesitated, but the older officer nodded. They followed me inside, where my laptop and external hard drive were still open. I reached for the remote on my desk and played the most recent footage. Karen standing across the street with her phone, dramatically claiming I was stalking her because I dared park my Harley in my own driveway. The footage showed me parking quietly, removing my helmet, and walking inside without even glancing at her. Not exactly an Oscar-winning performance on her part. The officers exchanged glances. "There's more," I said, clicking through folders. "Here's Tyler trying to touch the bike last week. Here he is again lifting the cover. And here's Karen approaching my front door multiple times, uninvited, with no legitimate reason. The young cop's pen stopped moving. So, she's been harassing you? I handed over a copy of the timeline I had printed. Incidents, dates, security captures, citations, and Karen's conflict of interest as the HOA compliance chair. The older cop rubbed his eyes like this wasn't the first time someone weaponized authority in a quiet neighborhood. "This is a lot," he muttered. "Why didn't you call us earlier?" "I thought I could handle it the civil way," I replied. But apparently, civil doesn't work in Oak Ridge Hills. The younger officer was now flipping through the HOA citations I'd printed. About 7 of them, all clearly bogus, all filed after my first note to Tyler. "I was actually just about to drop this off," I added, tapping the manila envelope, "to the state attorney's office. I think Karen's crossed more than one legal line." There was a long pause. The older officer nodded slowly, then turned to the younger one. "Let's go talk to the complainant." Before they left, I asked a simple question. "What happens now?" "Depends," the senior cop said. "If she's made a knowingly false report, she could be facing a misdemeanor charge. At the very least, she'll be documented. And trust me, once someone like her gets documented, it's the beginning of the end." I closed the door behind them and exhaled. It wasn't over, but something had shifted. The story Karen was trying to sell, the big, scary biker harassing her innocent son, had crumbled under the weight of her own theatrics. About 20 minutes later, I heard her shouting from across the street. She was arguing with the officers, gesturing wildly, voice high-pitched and cracking. I couldn't hear every word, but I caught a few gems. "He's dangerous. My son deserves respect. And my favorite, it's not illegal to ask for a ride." The cops didn't arrest her. I didn't expect them to. But they did hand her a piece of paper. She stared at it like it was a death sentence. Then she looked at my house. And for the first time since I'd moved in, Karen looked nervous. By nightfall, the neighborhood grapevine had already done its work. I got a text from Raj. "Did Karen really get a police warning?" "Oh, finally." Then one from Lucy, the sweet elderly woman 2 doors down. "If you ever need a witness, I've seen everything. That woman needs help." And perhaps the most satisfying, from someone anonymous, left in my mailbox on a sticky note. "Keep fighting the good fight. Not all of us are sheep." I sat on my porch that evening, sipping cold coffee and watching the sun go down behind the cookie-cutter rooftops. The war wasn't over. But I had won a battle. And for now that was enough. The morning after the police incident, the air in Oak Ridge Hills felt different. Lighter somehow. I wasn't sure if it was the late summer breeze or the collective weight of Karen's reign beginning to lift, but something had changed. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like I had to look over my shoulder just to take out the trash. And I wasn't the only one who noticed. It started with whispers, subtle shifts in tone from neighbors who used to avoid me, or at best, offer tight-lipped smiles as they passed by. That morning as I watered my front lawn, Greg from the next block over waved and walked over. "You really gave her a scare yesterday," he said with a grin, eyes flicking toward Karen's house. "Word travels fast around here." "I didn't do anything," I replied. "She called the cops. I just let the truth speak for itself." Greg chuckled. "Yeah, well, a lot of people have been waiting for that truth." He wasn't kidding. Over the next few days, neighbors I'd barely spoken to started opening up. Apparently, Karen had a long and colorful history in Oak Ridge Hills, a trail of targeted fines, manipulated citations, and quiet pressure campaigns that pushed out more than one resident. One woman, Mrs. Alvarez, confided that Karen had once fined her daily over a non-compliant rosebush until she gave up and hired Karen's recommended landscaper, who just happened to be her nephew. Another neighbor, Jordan, revealed that Karen had once cited him for excessive driveway chalk art after his daughter hosted a lemonade stand fundraiser. Yes, she fined a 7-year-old for drawing a sun with a smiley face. The problem was no one had ever pushed back. Not really. People just paid the fines and kept their heads down. Because fighting Karen, and by extension the HOA, felt like trying to swim against cement. But now, with a police warning issued against her and the biker guy, she tried to ruin walking around with a binder full of receipts. A ripple of courage spread through the neighborhood. Within the week, 4 other residents filed formal complaints to the HOA, not just about Karen's behavior, but about the board's compliance practices. Someone even dug up old meeting minutes where Karen had motioned to remove transparency clauses, citing resident confusion. Ironically, those very clauses were what allowed me to request the documents that exposed her conflicts of interest in the first place. By the second week, the HOA board could no longer ignore the growing pile of complaints and the looming legal pressure. Then came the letter. A thick white envelope, stamped with the state attorney's office seal. Inside was a confirmation. My packet had been received, reviewed, and officially opened as a preliminary investigation into Oak Ridge Hills HOA for potential abuse of authority, negligence, and procedural fraud. It was like holding a golden ticket. But the best part? The very next day, a notice was issued to all residents. Effective immediately, Karen, Patricia L., has been temporarily suspended from her position as compliance chair, pending investigation. I stood on my driveway that morning, reading the notice in disbelief when I saw her, Karen, standing on her porch in a silk robe, clutching her coffee mug like it was the last vestige of power she had. She saw the letter in my hand. Our eyes met. And for the first time, no smugness, no superiority, no clipboard. Just defeat. She turned and went back inside without a word. Of course, the HOA didn't dissolve overnight. Bureaucracies like that don't vanish, they shift, reshape, rebrand. But Karen's departure from the board triggered something bigger than just a personnel change. People started paying attention. A resident forum was organized. Bylaws were reviewed. Votes were cast. And for the first time in Oak Ridge Hills history, an independent oversight committee was formed to ensure fairness and transparency in HOA dealings. Karen's empire had been built on silence and fear. But all it took to dismantle it was someone saying, "No. No, your son can't ride my Harley. No, you can't manipulate rules to get your way. No, I won't be quiet just because it's easier." In the middle of all this, I got an envelope taped to my door. No name, just a folded piece of notebook paper inside. Written in shaky teenage handwriting. "Sorry about all the crap. My mom is, a lot. I shouldn't have messed with your bike. Hope we can just move on. Tyler." It wasn't much. But it was something. And I took it as the only real apology I was ever going to get. The quiet in Oak Ridge Hills after Karen's fall was a different kind of quiet. Not the tense, tiptoeing silence from before, but the kind that came with people taking a breath maybe for the first time in years. You could feel it in the air. Like the whole neighborhood had unclenched its jaw. The HOA board was still intact, but stripped of its God complex. The Oversight Committee, now dubbed the Resident Fairness Council, was made up of regular folks. A retired teacher, a nurse, even Raj, who everyone agreed had the patience of a monk. They started rewriting the fine system, tossing out vague clauses like excessive behavior, and replacing them with things that made actual sense. Citations now required photographic proof, and all complaints had to go through a rotating panel of residents for review. No more one-person judge, jury, executioner nonsense. As for me, I didn't exactly become a neighborhood celebrity, but let's just say the air of suspicion around the biker with the loud machine was gone. I was no longer the villain of Karen's one-woman drama. Instead, I became something else, the guy who stood his ground. And strangely enough, that earned me a lot more respect than being nice ever had. Lucy, the elderly widow 2 houses down, started baking me banana bread on Sundays. Greg waved every morning like we were lifelong friends. Even the aloof couple with the solar panels finally invited me to their wine and cheese thing. I didn't go, but it was nice to be asked. The best moment, though, came a few weeks after Karen's suspension. I was in the garage tuning the Harley, just basic maintenance, changing the oil, tightening bolts, when I noticed someone standing at the edge of the driveway. It was Tyler. Hands in pockets, head down, wearing a hoodie despite the heat. For a moment, I considered ignoring him. But I'd been a teenager once too, full of pride, rebellion, and bad ideas. So I turned off the wrench and walked over. He looked up briefly. "Hey," he said. "Hey." Long pause. He kicked a pebble, not looking at me. "You know that letter I left?" "I meant it." I nodded. "I figured. I didn't mean to, start all that," he mumbled. "I just thought it was a cool bike." "It is a cool bike," I said. "But it's not a toy." "I get that now," he said. And, "Sorry about my mom." That one hit different. Hearing someone say those words out loud, especially someone who had grown up under Karen's overbearing presence, took guts. It wasn't an excuse. But it was honest. And in Oak Ridge Hills, honesty had been in short supply for a long time. "You don't owe me anything," I said, "but you should know, you messed with something important to me. It's not just a machine. That bike's been with me longer than most people have." He nodded. "I get it. I really do." Then he did something unexpected. He asked if I'd ever teach him about bikes. Not to ride one, just to understand how they work. I considered it. Not because I wanted to be his mentor or fix him, or whatever inspirational nonsense they write in parenting blogs. But because maybe, just maybe, That was the first real crack in the cycle Karen had built around entitlement and control. "Maybe someday," I said. He smiled just a little, then walked away. Karen, meanwhile, had all but disappeared. Word was she'd taken a leave of absence from the neighborhood social committee, and some said she was even considering selling the house. I didn't care either way. Whether she stayed or left, her power was gone. And that was enough. The best part? The Harley hadn't been touched since. No sticky notes, no suspicious glances, no rogue teenagers sniffing around. Just me, my machine, and the quiet hum of a neighborhood finally learning how to coexist without control. One evening, as I cruised around the cul-de-sac for the first time in months, a few folks waved from their porches. Lucy even held up a sign. "Free to ride." She laughed so hard she nearly dropped her lemonade. For the first time since moving in, I actually smiled back without thinking about who might report it. Because finally, Oak Ridge Hills didn't feel like enemy territory. It felt like home. Funny how something as simple as a motorcycle can unravel the false fabric of a place like Oak Ridge Hills. You'd think the big problems in life come at you in loud, dramatic bursts, screeching brakes, courtroom gavel slams, shouting matches in public. But no. Sometimes it starts with a teenage kid asking for a joyride, and ends with the state attorney opening a case file against your homeowners association. Sometimes saying no causes more chaos than you ever imagined, and sometimes that chaos is the very thing that sets everything right. Looking back, I never intended to make a point. I wasn't trying to start a revolution or expose a neighborhood dictator. I just didn't want some kid joyriding my Harley. That was it. A hard boundary. A simple line. But people like Karen, they don't understand boundaries. They treat no like an invitation to escalate. And if no one pushes back, their version of reality becomes the law of the land. For a while, I questioned myself. I'll admit it. There were moments during the worst of it when I thought, would it really have hurt to let the kid sit on the damn thing? But then I'd remember the way Karen smiled like she already owned it. The way the citations kept stacking up like weapons. The look on Tyler's face when he grabbed the throttle like it was owed to him. That wasn't curiosity. That was conditioning, the kind that festers when entitlement is left unchecked for too long. My Harley isn't just a bike. It's the last 20 years of my life on two wheels. It's long nights under desert stars, gas station coffee, motel rooms that smelled like old wood, and strangers who shared campfires and ghost stories. It's freedom. Solitude. Peace. And it's mine. That's all I ever wanted anyone to understand. But here's what surprised me most. Once I stopped trying to avoid the conflict, once I stood my ground, it wasn't just about the Harley anymore. It became about everything else. The HOA nonsense, the fake rules, the quiet bullying that masqueraded as community standards. My neighbors weren't just dealing with one Karen. They were trapped in a system she'd created. One of fear, silence, and submission dressed up in pastel newsletters and board meeting buzzwords. And I get it now. People comply not because they agree, but because they're tired. Because they think speaking up means losing the little piece they have left. That's what Karen counted on. That's how she built her kingdom. Well, not anymore. Now, the residents of Oak Ridge Hills have voices again. Real ones. Not just behind closed-door complaints or whispering over fences. They sit in meetings. They ask questions. They vote. I even heard someone suggested turning the old HOA newsletter into a rotating community blog, where residents can share stories, recipes, photos of their dogs. That used to be Karen's sacred propaganda tool, now it might actually serve the people. Me. I keep to myself mostly. That hasn't changed. I still ride in the early mornings before the world wakes up. Still sip bad coffee on my porch and nod at Greg's dog when he passes by. The Harley's even shinier now, thanks to a fresh polished job and a new security system. Not that I think anyone would dare touch it again. Tyler certainly won't. I see him now and then. He doesn't say much, but he nods when he sees me. It's a start. Karen still lives across the street for now. Her roses are overgrown. Her porch light is always off. She doesn't wave anymore. And I'm okay with that. Every so often I catch someone new eyeing the Harley. A curious glance from a new resident. A whisper of nice bike from a passing jogger. I smile politely and keep moving. But I did get one strange request last week. A letter in my mailbox. Neat handwriting. No return address. Hi, I'm moving into 18C next month. I noticed your bike. Would love to talk sometime. I've always wanted to ride. P.S. My name's Melissa. I'm not a Karen. Grinning face with smiling eyes. I laughed out loud. Genuinely. First time in a while. Maybe that's the final irony. The Harley, the same machine that nearly got me run out of the neighborhood, ended up being the thing that brought it back to life. Not because it's fast or loud or beautiful, though it is all of those things, but because it became a mirror. It forced people to look at what they were accepting, and decide whether it was worth the silence. Sometimes the cost of saying no is high. Legal threats, social exile, endless stress. But the cost of never saying it? That's even higher. So yeah, I said no. And I'd do it again. Because peace, like a Harley on an open road, doesn't come when you stay quiet. It comes when you twist the throttle and go straight through the storm.